Role-playing games are my personal favorite genre. Dragon Age 4 and the next Mass Effect are officially being developed right now. I couldn't be more excited. So today we're going to talk about the single most important thing an RPG needs to nail in order to make a smash hit. No, it's not avoiding pandering to loud, obnoxious groups, although that certainly helps. Before we start, I'm giving away a console of your choice, either PS4, Xbox One, or Switch. All you need to do to enter is to be subscribed to my Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube channel and have left a comment. To start, check this video out. A little backstory first. The character has been to hell and back, literally, and is famous for killing demons with bloody ferocity. Let's watch. What did you notice about this scene? How absolutely badass you felt walking down that hall. You had everyone's respect and you felt the mix of awe and fear. After this moment though, you enter the facility and immediately take everything down, with the computer hyping you up like you're an unstoppable force of nature.
Warning, the Slayer has entered the facility. Warning, Slayer threat level at maximum.
This interaction immerses you in that fantasy as someone important and worthy. So ultimately, what role-playing games truly need to nail is the feeling of being a complete and utter badass. So hear me out. You will notice that every successful Bioware title has the main protagonist who you project yourself onto as someone who is elevated above the rest and whom the universe respects in one way or another. This leads the narrative down a path that makes the player feel invaluable and capable of changing the world. In Dragon Age Origins, you were worthy of becoming a Grey Warden from the start, a warrior of legend, and you determined the fate of the world all on your own. In Dragon Age 2, you began as a refugee and became the hero of a city on two separate occasions. In Dragon Age Inquisition, the fate of the world rested on your shoulders. You are seemingly marked by the Maker and were the only one that could stop the world from literally being torn apart. In Mass Effect, you were a hero from the beginning and eventually became the first human Spectre, which is basically like being Space James Bond. I won't touch on their older titles, most of them followed the same formula. Bioware knows that to make an amazing fantasy story, you have to make the player feel incredible, feel special. Now, of course, a good game needs other things too, like a decent engine and no game-breaking bugs, but making the player feel like a badass is what makes a good RPG great. I just think Bioware needs to double down on what they have already succeeded with in the past, and other RPGs need to take a lesson from Bioware. Everything stems from making the player feel like a badass. Ultimately, a major factor in enjoying a fantasy game is how accomplished it makes you feel, how rewarding it is, the journey it took you on, and how it sucked you out of reality and led you to a place where you felt ways you perhaps don't in real life. Maybe that means feeling special, maybe that's having interesting adventures or powerful friendships. So how does making your character badass do this? It does it by influencing the following: the character interactions, the antagonist, the combat, and the storyline. Let's start with how it affects the character interactions. So elevating the player's status means that there's a baseline for how the world can treat you. You can meet characters that are struck with pure envy, your fanboys and your fangirls. You could also meet the Snape types who don't buy into your fame with hidden motives. You could also meet those who want to be mentored or those who want to teach. You could also have people fighting over your affections or people targeting you for aggression out of jealousy. All of this serves a narrative and gives you a reason to immerse yourself in the world and develop connections with the characters. It also leaves room for character development. Say you start off as no one who, through trials and tribulations, grows into someone. A character that had no respect for you before can become someone that now does, or vice versa. They could start resenting you for turning your back on the old ways. The overall point is that having the player become someone truly special makes it easier to write supporting roles. The problem I see with some games is that through the cracks you can see where the writers didn't know how to further develop certain characters, and the result is a painfully bland cast. If the foundation is strong, they can write something infinitely more complex and holistic. If there is a goal, like supporting the badass main character and providing X interaction, then the writing becomes easier. X could be, like I said before, awe, fear, mentorship, hostility, and so on. Ultimately, these characters serve to give the player a sense of accomplishment, the feeling of being special and having interesting exchanges, something the player might be seeking in real life. Let's now talk about how a badass protagonist affects the antagonist. Sometimes the weakest aspect of a game is how badly written the overall threat is, the call to action. If you don't have any motivation to take on the ultimate foe, the ultimate negative force, then your drive to complete the game diminishes. If the guy's a real jerk, kills your family, destroys the world and kicks your dog, you damn well want to see him burn. As my main man Newton states, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if the game nails how badass you are, there must be an equal and opposite badass to bring balance to the story. The bar is raised to create a convincingly threatening antagonist that will test your resolve. You, the immovable object, will eventually have to face the unstoppable force, and with such a badass main antagonist, the epic will need to rise up to match it. A true badass will sink the world into chaos we can only imagine, will cause so much fear, disarray or manipulation that the state of unrest will grow exponentially. The need for a hero will surge and the potential feeling of reward at the peak of your world's salvation will magnify. Ultimately, beating this overwhelming negative force gives the player a sense of fulfillment that exceeds what the real world can provide. If we look at Mass Effect 2, its powerful endgame is still being discussed today. Why? Because throughout the entire narrative, you are being beaten by this ultimate negative force, harbinger of the Reapers. The Collectors, his agents, succeed in killing you, so right off the bat, you have a bone to pick and a personal vendetta. The mission at the end is dubbed the Suicide Mission for good reason, as one wrong step can permanently kill team members with whom you have built relationships and personal connections with. Except Jacob, that guy sucks. But anyway, when you take down the Human Reaper, you are met with a huge sense of accomplishment. You're Shepard, the ultimate badass who met an unstoppable force and succeeded. So cue the epic music and walk away feeling great. So let's talk about the storyline benefits from the player being powerful. The previous points fed into this. Great characters and a great antagonist together are usually enough for the gaps to be filled to create a decent story. If the ultimate goal is known, to make the player feel valuable, loved, powerful, or special, then the storyline already has a skeleton to work with. It then becomes about the journey. How do we get the player there? How do we make them feel these emotions? Dragon Age Origins had you starting as, in some cases, like the City Elf Origins, a nobody. The goal was that in the end you would be the savior of the country from a threat that is truly world-ending. From that point, it was about your struggle and rise to badassery, how people treat you, how you treat them, how you work towards that goal. Though the premise is simple, save the world and be the hero, the meat can be marinated in complex ways. The question can be asked, does this work towards the goal of making the player feel like a badass? If no, the writers can think about how it can. For example, say there's a quest involving a farmer whose crops keep getting burnt down. You are to find the bandits, take care of them, and report back to the farmer. So does this quest make you feel like a badass? No, not really. So how about instead you go looking for the bandits and you find out that they are enthralled by an intelligent dragon who's using them to bait you into a trap. After a long fight in which you're also having a debate with the dragon, you end up either killing it, gaining a powerful sword, or convincing it to join you. You walk through the town after, with dragon next to you or giant sword in hand, everyone in awe of you and your new item or party member. Now this is terrible, I'm not a trained writer, but the point I wanted to make is that there is a clear distinction there based on the objective. The first was a basic quest thrown in order to fill space. This has no objective. The second is the same quest that has the objective to make you feel powerful or worthy of being followed, and by doing so has a more profound effect on the story. The town now respects you more, and you respect yourself more. The combat is the next thing that benefits from being a badass. I referenced the new Doom before, but this level of action isn't what I'm suggesting. If the game's objective is to make you feel like a badass, then the combat needs to rise up to reflect that. A badass isn't going to find a single human in a challenge. No, you're going to have swarms of them flung at you. The difficulty comes from the scale of what you're facing or the sheer number of them. You versus the god or you versus an army. The combat can be filled with epic tactical decisions and powerful results, though it could also go terribly wrong and focus far too much on flashy moves and very little substance, but that is better than the opposite, which is having your character struggle to kill the wettest of slippery mud crabs. There are tons of examples I can give, but I'll use an example from one of the best games ever made, Witcher 3. In this you can take down werewolves and giant creatures, but fighting against humans feels the same. You're a powerful badass witcher, but fighting the wrong angry bar patron can be deadly. The combat was the weakest part of the game in my opinion, but that's not saying much considering how fantastic the overall game was. The point is that combat should rise up to match how badass your character is, and when done right, it has the potential to elevate the mundane into something you crave doing. When looking at games that don't do combat well, I won't list any because I don't want to be a hater on this video, but feel free to comment below. A lot of the time, it's bad because the developers didn't nail how it should make you feel. Once again, starting development knowing the character must feel badass automatically gives the mechanical direction, and with good direction, the player will feel a sense of accomplishment or get the feeling of being special and powerful. It's not a chore to get into combat in an RPG if the combat has some weight to it, and I mean that in the figurative and literal sense. So those were the reasons why making the player feel like a badass is the #1 thing RPGs need to nail in order to be a game to remember. It improves a magnitude of things, including but not limited to the character interactions, the antagonist, the combat, and the storyline. An honorable mention for #1 was well-written supporting characters, but like I described, the goal of making the player feel like a badass feeds into the supporting casts. Another point was to avoid letting groups influence the direction of the title for political or social gain. When thinking about that point though, it's not what would make the game fantastic, it just stops it from losing points. So what do you think? Tell me what you feel Bioware or any RPG needs to nail in order to produce a smash hit. If you enjoyed the video and this style of content, be sure to let me know. I make content for you at the end of the day, so be sure to give it a thumbs up if you want more. Subscribe and hit that little bell button as well. Donations are fine, but it helps me having you all subscribe and interacting on my videos much more. So thanks again, and I'll see you guys very soon.